So in a lot of these Hellenic polytheist spaces, people will say the myths are not literal, they're just symbolic, and Poseidon didn't actually do that. It's the standard disclaimer we give to newcomers as to not scare them off with the often dark nature of some of these myths and the actions the gods take in them. The problem with saying things like this is that it discredits the validity and power of these myths. It strips these beautiful tales of their power. When you look up at the sky and you see the sun and you say hello to the magnificent Helios in all of his glory, you know how science works. You know there's not actually a deity pulling a massive fireball across the sky from a horse-drawn carriage. At the same time, as a Hellenic polytheist, you believe that this is the case. Not in the sense of you're denying reality, but in the sense that you believe in a mythology-based faith. It's not the same as in Christianity or Islam, in a sense that you have a theological, yes, this is real, no, this is not real, and here's where in time this happened. You base your entire life, rituals, and practice off the fact that when you see the sun blaring in the sky, you picture Helios in all of his glory riding his chariot. And this is just one example of the myths in Hellenic polytheism being stuck in a sort of gray area between reality and fiction, and what I refer to as Schrodinger's chariot theory. Make sense? No? Well, keep watching, because I'm going to make it make sense if it's the last thing I do.
Hellenic, or ancient Greek polytheism, used to be widely practiced, known, and respected everywhere, from colonies in Ukraine to settlements in Egypt. But during the rise of Christianity, what we once knew as a well-sustained hearth was stomped out to be nothing but smoldering embers. Hellenism today is here to keep the fires of Hestia alive.
So let's start off by defining both sides in order to get across why you should be somewhat more in the middle. As Hellenic polytheists, we don't fully 100% believe that there was a point in time in which the sky and earth were interlocked, preventing the worlds from forming properly. This is referring to the union between Gaia and Uranus during Hesiod's theogony. We don't 100% believe that the only reason for the separation of this union was because a different deity came along and chopped the genitals off of Uranus. You get my point. Mythic literalism is simply not a thing we believe, nor is it something that ancient Greeks believed. On the flip side, we don't think that these stories are meaningless works of fiction. No, half, if not most, of Aphrodite's cult worship comes from the notion that after Uranus had his manhood chopped off, it fell into the ocean, and from the sea foam that surrounded it emerged the goddess of love and beauty herself. Everything from her epithets to her rituals and festivals surround beaches and the ocean and her role as the offspring of Uranus during this poetic moment in theology. And it's not just this one instance. There are entire festivals dedicated to Zeus and Hera's marriage, the birth of Apollo and Artemis, and many other important mythological events. If these events meant nothing, these traditions simply wouldn't exist. So we've established why both these extremes are not accurate to Hellenic beliefs. We don't blindly believe that there's actually a place called Hyperborea somewhere on the globe, or that Zeus actually comes down from the heavens to have flings with mortal women, but we also don't think these myths mean absolutely nothing. We have festivals, rites, traditions, and more, all based around these events that wouldn't exist if they were just tall tales. So you may be thinking, what's the problem with calling these myths symbolic? Well, to be as blunt as possible, the problem becomes painfully obvious when you put this idea into practice. So let's do just that. In the birth of Athena, you see the description of the goddess of wisdom and war springing forth from Zeus's head. So this could very well be symbolic because it's wisdom being birthed from Zeus's mind, right? No. That wouldn't make sense at all because Athena isn't the only goddess of wisdom. Athena's mom is also a goddess of wisdom. Zeus married Metis as his first wife, but fearing a prophecy eats her, not knowing she's already pregnant. The details aren't all important. The main idea is that it would be very difficult to derive some sort of meaning or symbolism from this specific myth. Because what would that even be? Zeus eats his wife, who symbolizes wisdom, and births Athena from his mind, who also symbolizes wisdom. No, it's very clear that's not the intended purpose of what the story is trying to convey. This is where Schrodinger's chariot comes into the picture. If you didn't already know, Schrodinger's cat is a famous quantum mechanics thought experiment in which a cat is sealed in a box with something that could kill it or not kill it. It is thought that this cat would be hypothetically both dead and alive at the same time until the box is opened to reveal what actually happened. I took a play off of this as to say that Helios' sun chariot is both believed to be there and not believed at the same time. The gray area in which most of these myths fall into can be described like this. Helios' chariot is both a literal spiritual vehicle and a metaphor for the sun's journey at the same time. The spiritual/theological world should not contradict what we know as basic science, but instead act as a parallel line that doesn't intersect. So favoring one over the other is a misstep. Instead, both are true. Even though you can't see him, Helios is up there, and even though Helios is up there, it doesn't mean what we know about astronomy means nothing. This is the gist of this theory. The nuance of following a mythology-based religion instead of a theological-based religion that follows a chronological timeline of events. Tying this back into your practice, this way of looking at things lets you properly consume these myths and interpret them in a more accurate way. When you worship Zeus, you're not just worshiping him in myth because the myths aren't literal, but you're learning about him through his myths because myths are real, all at the same time. And it's not to say this state of being true and false at the same time is a singular point. It's an entire gray area. Some myths can be seen as more true than other myths that may be actually more on the symbolic side. I'm not saying that there can't be instances in where that is true. In fact, believing what may be factual, symbolic, or a case of Schrodinger's chariot can differ from person to person. Remember, the majority of Hellenic polytheism is personal rights. Households can have varying beliefs under the Hellpool umbrella, even things such as one person believing Aphrodite is Zeus's daughter and another believing that she is a daughter of Uranus. Even Plato would get into debates with other people about which myths meant what and what level of reality it stood in. Not everyone has to agree on every single thing in the religion. So at the end of the day, it's up to you to interpret if Schrodinger's chariot applies to one specific myth or another. It's up to you to acknowledge the nuance and not just write off all myths as one thing or another. And most importantly, if you want to become a part of Hellenism today, go on our website and click join. That is all for today. Keep learning, practice Xenia, and stay dramatic, just like the gods intended.